Hey friends, Kaylee with Kayleighskanvases here. I am running a few minutes late for my promised live, but I just wanted to go in and paint this beautiful bird's nest with you. It's something that feels very spring-like, and spring is almost coming to an end, so I definitely wanted to touch on this before it was over. So this is going to be my reference as we go along, but what we're going to do, we're going to start off with a blank canvas or a blank piece of paper, whatever you want to paint on. If you have mixed media paper or whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what size canvas you use. So I'm just going to go in, because in this painting we start off with a black background, and then we work the basic shape of the nest and the branch, and we add in all the other stuff. So I'll just walk you through that. Okay, so I'm going to start off just by dampening my brush just a little bit. So I'm going to use a large flat brush. I also have with me, I have a small flat brush and a fine liner brush. These will be used for the finer details, obviously. And then for colors, I have, I'm going to start off with black, tan, white, baby blue, yellow, and I also have a light green and a magenta color that I'm going to use in there as well. Alright, obviously I also have paper towels and a cup of water, and I have my hair dryer handy. So we're just going to jump right in, and we're just going to start by painting the whole entire canvas black. Alright, this will give it the nice depth, and it'll make those colors really pop on your canvas. If you wanted to, you could paint the background any color. You could paint it blue for the sky, you know, yellow or orange or whatever color you want it to be. I just wanted to do black because I think it makes it stand out real nice. Alright, so we're just going to cover the entire thing. And if you are hopping on to paint along with me, or just to watch, I would love for you to say hi, tell me where you're from in the comments, tell me what your favorite part of spring is, even though spring has almost come to an end. We just found a baby, I don't know if it was a robin's egg or what, it was a very faded blue color. We found that in the yard, so somehow squirrels or something must have knocked it out of the bird's nest, which is unfortunate. But as you know, I always like to also paint the sides of my canvas, so I definitely will be painting the sides of my canvas as well. I always think it makes it look more professional when we paint the sides of the canvas. And I don't know about you, but I've definitely been enjoying the nice weather. Even though it's been kind of hot, it's been nice that it's not snow and not really cold. Just going to go all the way around. I'm probably going to end up with paint all over this paper here, but that's alright. That's why I have it here to semi-protect my table, even though it's just a paint table. Alright, so I'm almost done covering this in black, and then I'm going to have to wait for it to dry, so I'm going to use my blow dryer. But if you are painting this, you can either wait for it to dry, or you can use a hair dryer or whatever you want to use. You can use a book or a magazine or something to fan it with. Whatever you have at hand's reach, just to get it dry. Although in the heat we've had, it probably shouldn't take too long to dry. Alright, I'm going to retire that brush. Just going to rinse it off, and I'm going to grab my hair dryer, and I'm going to blow dry this, so don't mind the noise. You guys know I hate using my blow dryer. Right? But we're just going to dry this real quick, just so we can start getting that basic outline going. You know, if you were painting this on your own, at your own speed and your own pace, or you're watching this later, you can always pause this video and come back when it's dry. If you don't have a hair dryer, you can see on camera how quickly it's drying. It doesn't take too long. Acrylic paint dries very quickly, which is so nice. One thing you do want to be careful of is if ever you're painting with a thick amount of paint, you definitely want to make sure that you're drying it on a low heat setting, because really hot heat will make your paint crack, or can make it crack, and that is never a good thing. Okay, so it's pretty dry for the most part, and I'm gonna go in and I'm just gonna get a basic shape of a nest. Gotta find the hairdryer blew my paintbrushes, so I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna use my fine liner brush, and I'm going to draw the basic shape of the nest. All right, and I'm just going to just a basic shape. It does not have to be perfect. We're going to go around it and make some other, you know, add on to this with all the different strands that are in the nest. All right, so I'm just using my tan. You could use any color for this, but we're going to use a lot of tan in the nest, so that's why I chose to do it with this color. Okay, so I have the basic shape of like the middle part of the nest. We're gonna go up on the top and around and on the bottom, but this will give us kind of like a guide. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna still use this fine liner brush, and I'm just going to paint little lines that would represent like little sticks or twigs or pieces of grass or hay or whatever it might be that this bird made its nest out of. All right, and I can go under this a little if I want to change the shape, but it should be kind of like an oval shape, because as you can see, because it's at an angle, we're going to get kind of an oval shape here for the nest. All right, so we don't want to make it too circular, or else it's going to look like we're looking straight down on the nest instead of at it from an angle. It almost looks like we're peeking in on the nest. Not disturbing, just peeking. Just looking to see what that mama's got going on in there. Alright, so I'm just literally just going to do this for a while. Where I'm going to get those, and it's okay if they crisscross each other. As I'm doing this, to kind of end up with some fine points, I'm kind of twisting my brush as I do it. So I'm twisting and dragging. And the nice thing is, it doesn't have to be like a straight line. Literally, we can have like a really wiggly hand, and we could do this. Makes it very easy. Especially when it's like imperfect nature. That's what I love. The nature is imperfectly perfect. It's so beautiful. So I'm gonna, as I'm working my way around, I'm gonna do like I'm not gonna touch this middle part because I'm gonna want to paint the eggs in here in a little bit. But I'm just gonna put like the strands of hay and grass and twigs or whatever, like on the bottom and around, and then onto the top too. Right, if your brush starts to get dry, don't be afraid to either get it damp or add some more paint to your brush. Right, and you can just go, we're going to fill up a ton of this tan. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but that's okay, because art is not about rushing. It's about enjoying yourself and having fun. I would love to know if you're watching this, if you are painting along with me. even if it's later on. Even if you're watching this later, I would love to know if you're painting this. This is one of my paint kits that's available on my website at Kayleighskanvases.com with a K. Kayleigh with a K and Canvases with a K. And this is, like I said, it's available online. It comes with everything that you need. It comes with the canvas, the paints, the brushes, paper plate to put your paint on if you want to blend or whatever, and a paper towel to dry your brushes off with. It also comes with step-by-step instructions, and those instructions are super clear, and every step has a picture with it, which I can't tell you, like, I get the most compliments, not just on my designs, but on the instructions that I give with each kit, because I want you to, you know, if you're not going to be able to watch a tutorial and you're going to do a kit, I want to make sure that you are painting and understanding what's going on. Okay, so I've got a good amount here, and let's see, so this bottom part is going to be thicker than the top part just because of the angle. You know, whenever you're looking at something in the front is always going to look a little bit bigger, and in the back that's farther away is always going to look a little bit smaller. Alright, so I'm just going around. I'm just making this because this is going to be like a brighter part. This part right here, you'll see like it gets a little darker here where maybe some shadows hit. Okay. Alright, so I've got my basic shape and stuff for my nest. And while I can do a couple different things here. That's the nice thing about painting. It doesn't have to be exactly step by step like it would be in the kit. But these tutorials are great because you can really branch off and do anything. I could start with the branch over here, or I can start adding some other colors in here. But I think I am going to start with the branch over here. So what I'll do is I'm switching brushes, and I'm going to use my small flat brush. Just going to get it damp. Most of the time you want a damp brush. You don't want it to be soaking wet, but you want it to be damp. Alright, so I'm going to go in, and actually the reason why I want to do the branch first is because I'm eventually going to get some of this other part of the nest on top of it, and I don't want it to look like, I don't want it to look choppy like the branch was an afterthought. Alright, so I'm going to go, and I can make my branch go in any direction. Alright, you can see I have it kind of like squiggly and choppy. I want there to be a main part of the branch where it's a lot thicker than the rest, because most branches there's thick parts, and then there's little counterparts that are thinner. Alright, so I'm just going in with this tan color. Haven't switched colors yet, just tan. We will add some colors to it to make it look a little bit darker and lighter in some areas. And if you do want to paint off the edge of your canvas like I do, you don't forget to do that. Okay. Alright, I don't want the branch that this bird's nest to be on to be too thin, because I don't want the birds to fall out of the nest to fall out of the branch. Alright, so make sure you kind of put some other like smaller branches around that would kind of stabilize the nest itself. Alright, so I'm just going to go up and around, and it's all coming out of the same bigger branch. Okay. Alright, now to get some of those darker tones and to kind of blend it in, I'm just going to take, I have tan on my brush, I'm just going to mix in with just the tiniest bit of black, because black is very powerful in paint. So I'm just going to take that, mix it in a little bit, and I'm just going to use that on the underside of my branches. Alright, so I'm going to start kind of like here and just kind of blend in a little. Okay, and I'll do that on each branch because I want to make sure it has depth. You don't want your painting to look flat. I mean, you can, but it definitely gives it more character and a lot more pleasant to look at if it's not flat. I love realism. It always fascinates me whenever I create anything. I'm like, oh man, that looks pretty realistic. And even if it's not completely realistic, there's some parts that are realistic that really captures your eye, but then there's some parts that are whimsical, which kind of makes it creative in its own. Like a spin on real life, where my brain wants to be sometimes. Alright, so now I've got some of those darker parts. Alright, I'm still using my tan, and I might just blend it in a little bit more on some parts. You can decide how much blending you want to do. If you've got too much gray, you can always blend it in a little bit. And you can see, notice I'm being very kind of choppy with this. I'm not doing anything like super smooth, because shadows in nature are very rarely ever super smooth. Alright, I'm going to do a little bit more black for that underside, where it's going to be blended in just a little bit more black. You don't have to go this far if you don't want to. I just like to give it a little bit more realistic of a look. Okay. Because contrast is really what makes things pop and look more realistic. We don't realize in real life how much contrast everything has. We find out when we learn how to draw and paint. Alright, and okay, so we've got some of those darker undertones that are kind of blended in. It looks real nice. You can see it's got a 3D look. We're going to go a little bit further than that, and we are going to add in some highlights on this branch. So we added in the branch, and then we did the shadows. Now we're going to do the highlights, and you can either stay with this small flat brush depending on your brush, or you can switch to a fine liner brush. It doesn't matter which one, because this is going to be a little bit smaller detail. Alright, so for this I'm going to take a little bit of yellow, and I'm going to maybe mix just a little bit of tan. Alright, my paint is still slightly damp, not a big deal either way. And I'm just going to go in and just add little highlights just along the top of the branch. Remember, the shadow's on the bottom, alright, and the highlights would be at the top. So whenever you're doing highlights, it might look a little weird with some yellow on it right now, but we're going to also add in some white. Alright, remember, this does not have to be perfect. It's not going to look perfect in real life. It looks perfect when we're looking at it, but when we're painting it, you'll see at the end, it'll look more perfect than it does in the process. Alright, now for a little bit of white. I'm going to mix it in with that. Still maintaining more white than yellow or tan. Okay, and I'm just going to add in little white highlights. Very thin pressure, not applying a lot of pressure, because I don't want to go too far and overtake all the tan, and I just don't want to wash out any of the other important colors. So I'm just adding little bits of white highlight. And again, still concentrating on the top of it. Alright, think about whenever you're painting, you always want to think about where light is hitting. Alright, light and shadows are very important in any painting or drawing. Okay, so next we could do the outline for the eggs. Alright, for this step we're going to use, you can either trace it out with a fine liner brush first and then fill it in with your flat brush, or you can just use your flat brush. I'm going to show you filling it in, or tracing it out an outline and then filling it in. Alright, so you want to think about your eggs. You're going to want to take up a good portion of this, not all of it, because you want to see some of the inside of the nest here. Alright, but you don't want to take up all of it because then you won't see any of it. Alright, so we're just going to do basic outline of an egg. Remember, it's more of an oval. Okay, so you don't want it to be You don't want it to be a complete circle. You might want to make some going in a different direction somehow. All right, smaller one maybe peeking halfway out in the background. And remember, this is just an outline. Right now we're doing this in white. And the reason for that, even though the eggs are blue, we're doing this in white because we want the color to show up nice and bright on this black canvas. And white is going to help it stand out. Okay. So I've got my basic shape there. And I'm just going to go in with my flat brush. And I'm just going to paint the basic shape. All right, remember, this doesn't have to be perfect because we are going to go over it with that blue. And I do want to encourage you just to be a little bit careful because we don't want to lose some of our shapes. So like when you are painting like in here, if we just went all the way up to this line, we're going to lose it. It's going to look like one big blob all together. We want to make sure to leave just a little bit of a hint of the black there so that way we don't lose our lines. Alright, but I'm just doing a thin layer of white so that way my blue will pop, and I want it to dry quickly. So alright, we don't want our line to be too thick, but not so thin that we can't see where it is. Alright, I'm just keeping it very thin, not worried that some parts are a little thinner than others, because like I said, I'm going to cover it with that blue. Alright, you can see that I'm leaving a very thin line of black in between my eggs, so that way I know which one's which. Okay, and I'm going to rinse my brush, and I'm going to work on other parts of the nest while I let that dry. Okay, I'm going to go back to my fine liner brush for some of those other bits of the nest, and this time I'm going to add in some blue. Alright, not a lot of blue, just enough to give it little hints throughout it. This is going to, even though there's probably not going to be any blue in a real nest, which you never know because birds will use anything to make their nest with, this is going to complement the eggs. You can see I have little highlights of blue, and this is going to complement the eggs and actually, believe it or not, make them stand out even more. Okay, and we'll go back in and probably even add some more blue once we get to the middle part of this. Okay. Alright, you can see I don't have a lot of blue. Right, I'm just rinsing off my brush again because now I'm going to go in with the yellow. Alright, and I'm going to add in some little hints of yellow. I'm going to try to add it like in parts where there's maybe too much black showing up here. And I can always add more tan in later if I want to. Alright, and this yellow is just going to be some nice highlight or grass or hay or whatever. Just going to complement it. Alright, and again, I'm doing the same thing with those squiggly lines and motions. Not making anything perfectly straight. Perfectly straight can be a little bit boring when we're working with nature. Alright, we'll be doing more yellow than blue for sure because we want it to stand out more. But we don't want to cover up all the tan either. Okay. Alright, so while we're still waiting for these eggs to dry, which they're almost dry, we're going to go in and do the inside of the nest, because once we do the inside of the nest, then we'll work on covering the eggs. We'll come back to the white and the other things later. Alright, so let's see. I'm going to do, for the inside of this, I'm mostly going to do like a dirty tan. So I'm going to mix in some of that black. Not a lot. You don't have to do a lot. Just enough because we want it to look like a shadow on the inside. Alright, and same deal. And if it's not dark enough, you can always go back and add some more. This we don't have to be quite as specific with because it's going to be kind of darker. You're not really going to see it quite as much, so it's okay if it's not as pretty as the parts out there. It's mostly just a shadow. And it's okay if we even get little hints of black in there. You can see how I'm mixing it. You might get little hints of gray, little hints of black. Alright, just be careful not to go too much on your egg like I just did. Okay. Well, it's okay if you do though. Alright. But I want to stay with the basic circular motion of the nest. I don't want to deviate too far from that. Like I am going a little bit down to get into some of these little crevices here. But I don't want to make it look like the nest is lopsided or anything. Alright, so I'm just going to add in some more. I'll even add in some bright tan highlights. Not a lot, just a little. But I'll go in with some black as well. And if you notice, I'm not really washing my brush off in between colors on this because it doesn't matter if it's messy or perfect or imperfect. It's just got to be filling it with just a slightly darker color than what's at the top of the nest. Alright, and we can add a hint of blue in here too. We don't want to neglect it. Alright, but it's not going to be a lot. It's going to be little lines. Alright, and we'll even do a hint of yellow, but it's not going to be a lot of yellow either. Alright, I'm not even rinsing my brush off, that way I don't get too much yellow. Alright. If you don't think it's dark enough, go ahead and add some more black. But it'll brighten up, because when we add in the white highlights around it, we're not going to be adding any white highlights in the middle of the nest. So I think that looks pretty good. We can always change it as we go along if you want to brighten it up or darken it. Alright, so my eggs here are pretty much dry. So I'm going to find my flat brush. Again, I'm going to go back to my flat brush for this part. I only want a thin layer of baby blue. Okay, so I'm going to be sure not to do too much. Alright, it's important that it's most of the way dry. It doesn't have to be completely dry. You'll see that it's kind of, you know, even though I thought that my white was dry, there's parts of it that are still wet. So it's kind of making it a little bit lighter, which is okay. We can always come back and fill in those parts. Alright, so I'm going to actually leave parts of my egg white. And that is for reflection. Right? Part of the egg is going to have a little bit of a reflection on it, and you can decide where that reflection's at. So my reflection here, I have it right there and there and there. But in this one, I think I might do it here, maybe up here, and then over here. So I'll just be intentional about where my reflections are at. Right, I'm going to go back in with a little bit more blue. Alright, it's okay if it's not perfect. We're just doing some quick strokes just to give it a nice light blue color. We'll go back in and make certain parts of it darker in a little bit. But whenever you do a second coat, you want to make sure your first coat is dry before you do the second coat. Alright, that's why it's not a big deal if it's not perfect right now. Alright, so I'm going in with this blue here. And I'm not 100% covering up those dark lines yet, the lines that I left in between the eggs. And you'll see why in a little bit. I'm going to be adding some shadows in here, and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so we're just adding, this is probably the most difficult part of the whole thing, is just getting the nice shading on the eggs. So just take your time for this part, don't get frustrated. Everything that you do usually takes patience and practice to get better. Patience and practice. And you know, whatever works in your favor, you can do it. If you try a technique and you think a technique works better for you, that's absolutely fine. Use a different technique than I use. A lot of times I'll use what works good for me. It might not work for everybody, but for the most part, most of the techniques I use are good for most everybody. Alright, I'm just rinsing off my brush. I'm going to let that dry before I go in with a second coat. Alright, and while I'm waiting for that to dry, I am going to add in the white highlights around the nest. And as you can see in the original picture I did, I mostly left just the white highlights to wherever the top of the nest is. I didn't want to add in any white highlights in the inside, because we're not going to have any highlights in there because that's kind of hidden. Okay, so I'm just going to use my fine liner brush, and I'm going to go in with those same squiggly motions that I did with the other ones. Alright, just trying to give it some highlights. Alright, again, no real rhyme or reason other than I can cover up some colors, other than just going around in this circular oval motion. You know, no real rhyme or reason to it. And if anybody does end up painting this, I would love to see your finished painting. I love to see when people paint, because people always, a lot of times will be like, I didn't know I could paint that good. Or sometimes they might just have a question, well, how could I do this a little bit better? And I would love to help you. If you have any questions, you paint, you want to show me, I'll be happy to give you compliments and critiques, whatever you're looking for. Whatever is going to build your confidence to make you enjoy art a little bit more or help you get a little bit better, that's what my goal is. I want to help build your confidence. Alright. Alright, we can even add in some more little things in a little bit. But let's see, I'm going to go in with maybe just adding a little bit of a shadow to part of my eggs. Alright, so for this I'm going to use the smallest bit of black. Alright, and I'm going to mix some blue in with that. The smallest bit of black. Alright, do not use a lot of black. We're just going to get a shadow here. I'm just blending until I get a nice dark baby blue. Well, not too dark. There we go. You can see it's just a little bit darker. Alright, and I'm going to try to concentrate. You can use either brush. I'm using my flat brush. You can use either your flat or your fine liner. And I'm just going to go around the base of the egg wherever there might be a shadow. Okay, and just use very little pressure so you don't get too choppy with it. You don't want a lot of paint on your brush. Alright, it might look, and this is the part that might look a little weird to you. You might be like, well, it's kind of blotchy in some areas. That's okay. because we're going to be adding these freckles to it, and most people aren't even going to be able to realize that there's any blotches or anything on this. Alright, so we're just going to do that shadow. Alright, kind of remember what I said. Think about where your shadows would be. I'm not going to put my shadow on the very top of my egg. That's where my highlights are. I could put it on the side where I think maybe the nest might cover part of it up. And then just kind of blend lightly until you're happy with your shadows. And we'll go back in and we'll add some branches in front of this in a little bit to make it look more realistic, to give it more depth. Alright, now what we'll do, because as you can see I have a little bit of black here, that's going to bring out the depth, even more depth in this. So I'm going to use my fine liner brush for this part. Alright, and I'm going to want to have a steady hand, so I'm going to bend down a little bit for this part. Sorry if you can see my head. Alright, I'm not going to do a lot. This is very, very small amounts. And I'm just going to go in kind of like in the cracks of this, outlining just the back egg. Starting with this one. Just very gently. I have like the slightest bit of pressure on this, just so I can get that dark shadow in there. Okay, and I'll do the same thing just a little bit down here. Nothing crazy. I don't want too much, because then we'll kind of lose the egg a little bit. Just a little bit. Alright. Alright, so I got that. I can even add maybe a little tiny bit more in the back corner. Just a little bit. But I don't want a lot, or else I'll lose it. I might have done a little too much, but I can cover that up. Alright, so I'm going to let this dry most of the way, and then I'll go in with some more blue in a little bit. Alright, let's see. What do we want to do next? Actually, I'm going to dry it so that way I can do it, because the next step is I just want to finish these eggs before I can finish the nest. So don't mind the loud noise. Alright, so while I'm waiting for this to dry, the next step I'm just going to add another layer of blue on here, just to brighten it up just a little bit, and then we'll add in our little speckles on the eggs. This isn't going to take much to dry these eggs. They were mostly dry anyways. Okay. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to go back in with my small flat brush. Just with that blue, a little bit of blue, I don't need a lot. And I'm just going to trace over the parts that I want to brighten up. Okay. And as you can see, it doesn't take much paint, doesn't take much pressure, just very light. But the key thing was that this was dry. So that's why I used a blow dryer. Whenever you do layers, I know I repeat myself all the time, but I want to make sure that what I'm saying sticks. Alright, so whenever you're painting and you need to add like a second layer, just make sure that your first layer is dry, or else you're just going to be smearing around the first layer when you try to add on a second layer. Alright, and we can even, like this, I wasn't too crazy. I'm going to kind of cover it up just a little bit. I can always add that highlight back in. I didn't like how I didn't like this shadow here. I like it, but it was a little too blockish. Alright, so I'll add that shadow, that highlight back in. So even if you decided to paint the whole eggs blue and add your highlights in after, that's completely fine. That's the nice thing about painting. There's really so many different ways to do it. Alright, now if I want to fix that highlight, I can do it while it's wet. Alright, I'll just take a little bit of white, just a little bit. I don't want too much. Alright, and I'll just add in a little bit. Alright, I might need to get some white off because I think I grabbed too much white. And I'll just blend it out if it's too much. There you go. So pretty much a dry brush can really help you blend too. So that's what I did. I rinsed off my brush and I kind of dried it on my paper plate. Or on my paper towel. Here we go. Dry brush is great whenever you're blending two different wet paints. Okay, so now we'll go in with our speckles. And this will be done with the fine liner brush. We're going to just get a little tiny bit of black paint. Just a little tiny bit, maybe mix it with a little bit of blue. But I'm just going to kind of dab it because I don't want a lot on my brush. I just want a little bit. And as you can see, they're kind of a little bit choppy. They're not perfect. They're not like little tiny dot. You can make them however you want to. But I just kind of want some imperfect little speckles. Alright, so if they're too bold, you can change them. I would try to concentrate most of your speckles in a certain area. But if your speckles are too dark and you don't like it, just add a little bit more blue to it or get a little bit more paint off your brush. Just dab it on a dry area of your paper plate. But I like the speckles I got going on here. Alright, my paint might still be a little bit wet, my blue paint. So that's why it's kind of blending in a little bit in some areas, but that's okay. I think it looks cool like that. Because if you look at a bird's egg, it's really not like a perfectly round little speckle. Alright, so we'll just go in with a few more dots, however you want, wherever you want. Alright, I think they look cool, kind of concentrated in one general area. I'm doing some small, some little, or some small and some big. Gosh, whenever I do videos, I mix up my words, so I apologize for that. For some reason, my video is not showing me any comments. I don't know if anybody's commented. Can't see it. My video looks a little different today for me. Facebook might have changed the way that they're doing their lives. So if anybody is commenting anything, I'm sorry I'm not responding. I'll respond after. Alright, and when you get down in this little crevice where they kind of meet, you could do some darker little speckles, because it's going to be more of a shadow. You can even maybe add a little bit more shadow if you want to. Okay. Alright. So I think I have enough speckles. Alright, I'm going to rinse my brush. And now I'm gonna rinse it good because I have black on my brush, but now I'm gonna go in and do these fun other colors on here. The yellow and the green and the pink. Okay, and you can add in any more colors. If you want more tan in here or whatever, like in my picture I actually put some black down here. I didn't here, which I could, so I'll do that at the end because I want to add in some pretty little colors up top. Alright, so I'll start off, I gotta get some green on my plates. Don't need a lot. I always take too much paint whenever I'm painting with you guys because I don't want to have to run away and get more. But we're just gonna do take your brush, put some pressure, and just pull, sweep. All right, and this is just going to make it look like little tiny blades of grass or little tiny leaves that are going to be coming up near our flowers or whatever. Alright. And this green is kind of going to add some nice highlights to our nest. Alright, so you're just going to go in and you're going to add these wherever you want to. Scattered all throughout the nest, concentrated on one side, however you want to do the little leaves, that's up to you. Alright, I kind of like doing it where you might have like a little bit in front of it, in front of the egg, because that'll give it kind of like a 3D look to it. It'll make it stand out a little bit more. Okay, so I think I have a good amount of those. Alright, I'm going to rinse my brush again, just lightly. It doesn't have to be perfectly clean because we're going to go in with some yellow next. And we're just going to put yellow on top of the green little leaves that we did. That's just going to give it a little highlighted look. We're not going to add a lot of pressure, not adding a ton of yellow to it. Just enough to make it look like the sun is hitting it or some light from somewhere. I don't know if you can hear it, but I can hear the rain and the thunder outside. It's hitting my air conditioner and making little tinging noises. I like the sound of thunder. Alright, so I've got the green, most of the yellow touched up on the green. Alright, and then I'll go in with a little bit of pink and add the flowers. We're almost done here. It's really not as hard as it seems. When you look at it, you might be a little daunted by the picture, the complexity. It might look like a lot, but it's really not too bad. Alright, and we're just going to go in and we're going to add some little dots for flowers, like a dot for one petal. Alright, and we're just going to do a few dots to make it look like a little flower. It might be hard to see in the painting or in the video on the painting. Alright. We're just going to go in either 3 little dots, 4 little dots, whatever connected to make it look like petals. Okay. And then we'll go in and just add like a little tiny black center to those. And you can make these as big or as small as you want to. Alright, and these will kind of look unfinished until you do add those little centers to your flower. A lot of times, sometimes it's the little tiny details that we don't think about that really make our picture, like highlighting or the little center to the flower or shadows, can really make it look more realistic. Alright, and this pink really makes these other colors stand out nice too. I love it. Okay, I think I might just want one more somewhere else. Let's see. Maybe a couple baby ones over here. Okay. Alright, so now the last step that I'm going to do, I'm just going to go in with some black. I'm going to add the little centers to my flowers, and I'm also going to add in those little shadows on the nest down here and having it come over the branch right there, so that way it looks a little more 3D-ish. And then we'll be all done. Alright, I'm just doing little tiny dots, nothing major, but it does add some depth. It shows a middle point to each flower, so you can kind of tell that they're separate petals. Okay. Alright, so right now I'm getting my fine liner brush dipped in black, and I'm just going to do really thin little squiggly lines, and I'm going to go over a little on the branch, and that's okay because that's going to just show like a little shadow, and it's going to make it look like the nest is sitting on the branch rather than floating above the branch. And like I said, you can play around with this and get as many colors or add more tan or whatever. If you want to put different colors in your nest, that's cool too. Whatever colors you do, I would love to see them. Alright, I'm going to go in with just a little bit more, maybe some of that dark tan color down here. Okay. Alright, I think we are all set. Alright guys, so that is how you paint a bird's nest. If you paint it, I'd love to see it. Thanks so much for watching. If you're watching this on Facebook, I'd love you to like my channel so you can follow for more Facebook Lives, or if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe so that way you don't miss anything. Sometimes things get lost on Facebook. But thanks so much for joining, and I